All right, we are live and it's 12 o'clock and I want to welcome you. My name is Father John Pedigo. I am the Director for Advocacy and Community Engagement at Catholic Charities. I want to welcome all of you that are watching either by Facebook Live or watching it, from the from staff. We want to also welcome folks that are joining us from other organizations. This is part of our monthly series on race, equity, and Black Lives Matter. This is the third in our series of this. We will be going live, and we'll be going live on my Facebook page in just a few moments. We want to welcome Reverend Steve Pinkston, who is a retired faculty member from Bellarmine College Prep and is also currently serving as the associate pastor at Maranatha Christian Center. He's a longtime advocate and a longtime friend of the agency. And at the same time, he is really very connected to the community and issues surrounding race and Black Lives Matter. He'll be introducing the panelists. So this program will be running for an hour. Again, it'll be available on our agency webpage, and it will also be available on Facebook Live on my account, as well as on the agency's Facebook page as well. Hopefully that you'll get a chance to talk about the content of what's going on with the folks that are in your own homes and your own circles and your own departments and divisions. And if those of you are visiting from outside the agency, we want to welcome you. And then this is an opportunity for you to maybe share this with folks in your own spaces. So while we're going live, I'm going to now turn it over to my very good friend, Reverend Steve Pinkston.
Thank you very much, Father John, and thank you to those who have tuned in. I am very happy to be with you this afternoon, and happy first to interview both Antoine Chapman and Sean Chapman. Antoine is an associate marriage and family therapist, and Sean is a licensed marriage and family therapist. If you look at them, you might see that they look to be twins, and yes, they are. Gentlemen, it's good to be with you. I have some questions for you relative to the talk. African-American parents and many Latinx parents are familiar with the talk. Sometimes I will refer to it as Racism 101. It can incorporate driving while Black or brown, or walking while Black or brown, and encounters with police and encounters with overt racism. I know I had to engage in that talk with my children.
Facebook Live or whatever, but that's okay.
I'm going to ask Becky and anyone else who is on this call to mute yourselves, please, so that we can focus on our panelists, our guests. As I was saying, Antoine and Sean, as a parent, I had to have this talk with my son, with my daughter when they were teens, and that was due to my experiences 50 plus years ago as a youth. At the age of between 10 and 12, I had a few encounters. I remember my family had moved into an integrated neighborhood, and I was out mowing the lawn one day, and a white man, I won't call him a gentleman, but a white man drove by and yelled at me, "Nigger, go back to the jungle, go back to Africa." And I was quite put off, quite shocked, unsure why he would say that to me. I hadn't done anything to him, had not offended him. I remember at age 12, walking to the beach. I grew up in Asbury Park, New Jersey, a coastal town similar to Santa Cruz, going to the beach with two friends. I was 12. My good friend Norris Williams was 13. My other good friend Michael Smith was 11. And we went to the beach to play and hang out in the water. And then coming home, we walked through J.J. Newberry's. It was like a department store. and we were talking and joking and looking at things. And one of the managers in the store saw us and was, I guess, upset that three young Black boys were walking through the store. And he accused us of taking items. And he pulled us aside. He called the police, Asbury Park Police. They came, challenged us, accused us of stealing. We emptied our pockets. Nothing was found. We hadn't taken anything. We weren't disruptive. We weren't doing anything wrong. But nevertheless, he took us in his police car, put us in his police car, and took us down to the police station in Asbury Park, New Jersey. So based on those experiences, I needed to have the talk with my children. I'm going to turn it over to you right now. In your work with youth who are within the probation system, youth who have experiences with Catholic Charities, what has been your experience in talking with them about Racism 101? You may start off talking about your own personal experiences and your conversations that you have with youth. Antoine, I'll turn it to you first.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so with our clients, so I work with SES. We work with youth who are on general probation in Santa Clara County, so all throughout the county. So that's from Palo Alto all the way until Gilroy. And there's definitely, you know, a diverse group of young people that we work with, and they live in specific areas that they may face a lot of this kind of overt racism, basically from people in their communities as well as the police. And in some cases, unfortunately, some people, some of my clients kind of end up on probation due to this unfair treatment and things that happen because of that. So I think a lot of times the conversations start off with just connecting on both of us being a person of color. And a lot of the clients are male, so also connecting on that and how that impacts some of the things that we see from the rest of the world. And so I think that first part, like I said, is connecting. I feel comfortable sharing my own story sometimes, especially if they ask, or if I feel like it'll help with that relationship and that rapport. And so that's usually initially how it starts. I don't know if you want me to go more into how we address that job treatment or.
Well, please, first of all, if you would share a little bit of your story, your encounters.
Sure. Okay. So my brother and I, we grew up in East Palo Alto, separate city from Palo Alto. Palo Alto is, you know, obviously a very wealthy type of city, a lot of resources and things like that. We had the opportunity to go to school in Palo Alto through the Valley Transfer Program. And we started with kindergarten. And so even from the young age of 4, we were 4 years old when we started kindergarten until we turned 5 in October. And even from then, our parents was already kind of preparing us that we would look different, that people may look at us differently. Those kind of experiences might happen. Of course, thankfully, we didn't have any like serious encounters until middle school. And so I remember if I could share one instance where my brother and I were walking in Palo Alto, and it was a day that it had just finished raining. And there was a little bit of flooding on the side of the road. And we were walking down, going to a resource for a school to get some tutoring, basically. And there was a truck that went by and he splashed us with a lot of the flooded water on the side of the road. And we weren't expecting it at all, right? We were just walking. We thought that the truck, you know, wouldn't go into the big puddle, but he splashed us and he looked at us and he said, "I hate your kind." And we were 7th grade, I think, maybe 6th. So we're about 11 years old, 11 or 12. And I just remember being really confused, honestly. That was the biggest feeling that I think I had. And then I got upset because, of course, my clothes are wet. Sean's clothes were wet. And we still had the rest of the day in front of us. So when we got home, we told our parents about that. And then they kind of opened up more and started telling us more about why this may have happened, and just to protect ourselves and to be aware of our surroundings. And yeah, that was a really tough experience, starting off, you know, at 11 or 12 years old.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, there's a lot of other times, unfortunately, where we had those encounters, us being students in Palo Alto, but originally from East Palo Alto, and being students of color, being Black, while driving, both of us in the car together, we got pulled over countless times. I think my brother and I try to say a safe number of 15 to 20 times before we graduated high school, getting pulled over. And we started driving our sophomore year. So that was within 2.5 years or so of driving in Palo Alto. We were pulled over that many times and never got a ticket, never did anything wrong. It was always just like, oh, you know, we asked them, why did you pull us over after everything was said and done? Oh, your license plate light was out, or your tail light was out, or I didn't see if you used your blinker or not. Things like that. So that's a little bit of some of the experiences that I experienced. And I kind of want to save some for Sean, I guess, and have him chime in as well.
Thank you so much. Challenging, I know those experiences were. You talked about when you went to kindergarten, when you were in elementary school in Palo Alto, not East Palo Alto,
Right.
Your parents kind of giving you a foretaste, kind of warning you that people may look upon you differently.
Definitely.
That brought to mind a situation with my daughter when she was in 3rd grade. She was in a school that was predominantly white, mixed, but predominantly white. And a white classmate came to her and said, Lauren, my parents tell me that I'm not supposed to like Negroes, but I like you. And just that sense of, do I fit in? Do I not fit in? How well received am I going to be? Sean, do you have anything that you'd like to share? I'm sure you do, beyond what your brother Antoine has shared.
Yeah, I think that as he said, growing up in East Palo Alto and living in East Palo Alto our whole childhood, and until we went away to college, it just provided a lot of different contexts and experiences. East Palo Alto being primarily African American, Mexican American, and other Latin groups as well as Pacific Islander, a lot of people who and maybe some Asian as well. Communities there. And then being in Palo Alto, which was like mostly white, Asian community as well. And going to school there, what he left out was that in our school, part of the reason why we were allowed to go to school in Palo Alto was that we were in that Tinsley transfer program, but we got in through the Spanish immersion program. So us speaking Spanish, I think, was another thing that threw people off with us being there. And most of our elementary education was in Spanish. And so we kind of, I think for ourselves, it kind of made us feel like, what culture do we quite fit in, right? But I think with those challenging experiences for sure in Palo Alto, even having, the microaggressions from parents saying, you can hear them on the phone 2 rooms over saying like, yeah, Jeremy's friends are Sean and Antoine, they're Black, but they're different. Or, they're Black, but they're really smart. And there was always a but, right? And always like, this is why I'm allowing them to share this space with my kid. And us at first, being confused, obviously, but then also like feeling like, we were representing way more than just ourselves. And going through the educational system, was a challenge as a student of color, not to mention dealing with the, outside of the walls of that school, the police, and the community members, and the ways that we had to interact with police just by trying to get home safely. And so, I mean, one experience that I can share, which was one of the many times that we were pulled over, it was later in the evening, we were walking to the bus stop. So we already had our licenses, but we shared our car with our mom, so we weren't always driving. We were walking to the bus stop in Palo Alto, and we got pulled over. And they stopped us and they said, is it okay if we search you? And naturally you already feel disempowered around police, so you just say yeah, especially if we haven't done anything, let's just get this over with. Yeah, go ahead and search us. So they did an illegal search on us, and then we said, hey, why are you messing with us? What's going on? And they said, well, there's been a lot of break-ins in this area, and we wanted to make sure you didn't have anyone else's property on you. And as they continued to talk and go on, this is probably at that point our 8th or 9th interaction with police. And it was getting late. We were going to miss our bus, the last bus to go to East Palo Alto. And so we asked them, pretty abruptly, was like, hey, can you wrap this up or are you going to take us home? Because we got a bus to catch. Unless you want to take us to the bus stop or, work that out for us, that would be fine. But otherwise, like, why are we here? And you can tell the officer was really upset. But thankfully, one of the officers that had stopped us a year and a half plus ago was present and said, no. I know these guys are good. Like, let's let them go. They're fine. Let them go, type of thing. So he was able to advocate for us as he was one of the, I guess, responders to a different incident that had taken place some years ago, and recognized us and knew that we were, pretty stand up and not into any trouble. So he was able to advocate for us, which, helped us catch our bus home. But I just remember, just feeling this confusion and this mix of like being blessed and being fortunate, but also just like what if there was something else going on, or what if this went in a different direction? What if he wasn't there? And that cop that got upset by me just kind of asking, like, are you going to let us go home on time? Like, that could have gone a different direction if no one else was present. So I think for us, it's always been hard. We've been super blessed in all of our interactions to never have anything come out of it. But we know that that's not the case for everybody else. And so, as angry as we can get justifiably, there's also this other part of us that's super grateful that it never did go anywhere else, which is a hard space to hold,
It's certainly hard to hold. I'm glad that nothing negative happened. You weren't in a situation like Trayvon Martin or countless other Black men who have had negative and sometimes deadly encounters with police officers. You talk about being stopped numerous times, and that's so, as a Black man over 60, that hurts my heart. I know when I had I've been stopped for driving while Black in California numerous times, in Oregon, I used to live there, in Washington and New York. I mean, 4 different states for DWB, driving while Black or brown. And when I had conversations with my son and daughter, but more so with my son, I had conversations because I wanted him to come home at the end of the event. I wanted him to be safe. I wanted him to know, in no uncertain terms, if you get stopped by a police officer, just try to remain calm.
Right.
Keep your hands on the wheel.
Absolutely.
Don't make any sudden movements. Don't reach for your glove box before he asks you for license and registration. My son was a scholar athlete. He went to Bellarmine Prep and he played football. And I told him, when you are driving home from a basketball game or a football game with Jelani Young or Jamon Osby, 2 of his good buddies, please understand that a police officer may look at the 3 of you Black young men and say, there's a gang. And I want you safe. And my son would respond, but Dad, what are you talking about? I'm not a part of a gang. I don't have any gang affiliation or activity. And I said, son, I understand that to be the case, but there are prejudices that exist in society, and I want you safe. So this is what you do. And these are some things that you don't do. For both of you, what have your conversations and encounters been like with some of the Black and brown youth that you talk with and counsel?
Yeah, I'll just start again, I guess. Some of the conversations have to do with, and kind of what you mentioned, right? Our parents told us the same thing. Just do as they say. Keep your hands where they can see them, type of thing. Let them know your every move, right? And so I've told my clients that as well, if their parents didn't tell them that. But I think a lot of the counseling and kind of therapy that happens there is about juggling these mixed feelings of, hey, I have certain rights, but if I really want to be safe, I kind of have to not exercise those rights just to try to make it, go as smoothly as possible, right? And so there's just that's challenging, to just know that I should have these rights. And then not to mention then, since most of the youth are, on probation while we're serving them, they lose certain rights by being on probation. And so there's also that piece. And as they get ready to get off of probation, there's that discussions and preparation around, okay, you'll have these rights back, but how do you when do you exercise and when do you not, right? And, you know, letting them choose what they think is most appropriate so that they can try to stay safe as possible and make it home and not end up, you know, back incarcerated and things like that. So that's what a lot of the counseling is about. It's about those challenging feelings. It's about processing those feelings. And then how do we work with all of this, you know? And, you know, it sucks. It shouldn't be like this, but it is like this, at least currently, right? And so it's
Yeah.
like, how do we even deal with that part of knowing that it shouldn't be like this, but it is? So what do we do?
It's almost as if you're labeled a criminal before
Yeah.
you have done anything wrong. I'm reminded of a piece written by Frederick Douglass a little bit over 150 years ago, about 152 years ago. He wrote a piece in reference to his son Lewis, who had served in the Civil War, and the piece was called "His Crime Was His Color." Okay.
Yeah.
There are lots of things that he was denied, things that he couldn't do, couldn't secure a job in a printing press union, though he had worked for his father with the North Star newspaper for years and years, but could not get a position in the union because of his color. His crime was his color. And that's so challenging, frustrating, and I think drives some Black youth to a point of, I'm mad as, forgive me, I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. Sean, do you have any comments relative to the young people that you counsel and work with?
Yeah. And just going off the point that you just mentioned, you know, Anthony Ray Hinton in his book, The Sun Does Shine, mentions that, you know, you were born guilty because you were born Black. And I think with the youth, right, you add in the communities that we've been, you know, marginalized to and forced to live within because of different socioeconomic status and opportunities or lack of opportunities, where there's a lot of community violence, there's a lot of other things going on, right? And so not only am I asking, you know, a young person, as we process their trauma, we process maybe abuse and different things, when that officer comes so aggressively to them, they might be fully triggered by thinking about their dad or somebody else, you know, domestic violence altercation that they have witnessed and something that's very traumatic for them. And so you're asking them to put all of that on hold and still be quiet and still, you know, just be calm. And how do you navigate that when there's so many other mental health, you know, things present? And it's such a challenge. And, you know, so the counseling obviously is about all of the trauma and all of the different things they've experienced on one side, but also navigating the criminal justice system, some of them even being innocent, right? And just wrong place, wrong time, or closest to the crime scene. And that's who got pulled in. And just how do you navigate that when you didn't even do it? And now you're looking at, do I just plead guilty to get the least amount of time? Or do I take this to court and hope that they'll actually, you know, that the evidence will show that I didn't do it, right? And it's just, it's very difficult and heartbreaking to know that, you know, so many years later, we're still facing these issues and dealing with these things as early as 8, 9, 10 years old and moving forward.
So you are working with youth and counseling youth that are single digits in ages, 8, 9, 10.
11 usually. 11 is the earliest that we've seen in the program at least. But now I'm working with younger children, not necessarily in the juvenile justice system, but some of it is preventative for sure, because, you know, we know about the prison pipeline, and, you know, some of these kids are maybe getting expelled because of behavioral issues, and it, you know, because of where they live, they're at risk of being maybe associated or different things happening, or at least looking like they are something that they're not. And so, yeah, there's definitely that risk factor there for our young people.
You both shared that a challenging experience happened to you two when you were in 7th grade. That's around the age of 12. I remember my son having a challenging experience when he was 12. And my son played baseball, since he was playing t-ball at the age of 5, 6, 7, 8, was a pretty good baseball player. And as a way to create funds for the league had all the players sell candy or sell wrapping paper. You smile like you used to do that.
Yeah.
And I recall that, as when he was 6, 7, 8, 9, he would go around the neighborhood and sell candy, sell the different items, and folks in the neighborhood would receive him very well. But when he turned about 12, this young, cute little Black boy who had been received by neighbors was no longer seen as a cute little Black boy, but was seen as an adolescent threat. And the same people that received him and opened the doors to him were now closing the doors to him, saying, "Go away, don't come in, I don't want anything." And that for him was just disheartening. It was like, what did I do? What did I say? My dad's taught me, my mom has taught me to be respectful. What is the change? And in the words of Frederick Douglass again, his crime, so to speak, was his color, which was so disheartening. I'm going to hold you two on the panel, but I also want to invite two other people right now. Candace Chin, trained as a lawyer, is, I believe, the Refugee Foster Care Director with Catholic Charities, and Sabre Ramirez. I'm not exactly sure of your role. I think you used to be Systems Improvement Director. We want to invite you into the conversation. And I want to start off with you, Candace. You oversee the Refugee Foster Care Program. And with that, clearly you have some students of color, Black, Brown, Asian students who may be placed in foster homes or may be placed in homes where parents are about to adopt them. Have you had any challenging experiences with that cross or transracial adoption, that transracial foster care, where you might have white parents who are adopting or being foster care parents for Black, Brown, or Asian students? Candace, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Reverend. So I'm the director of our refugee foster care program at Catholic Charities. And just a point of clarification, our youth are not, we don't do adoption in our program. So it's, we talk about permanency and family reunification when possible and safe. But you're right. So just a little bit of background and context. Youth who are in our program are refugee and immigrant youth who are in the United States unaccompanied, right? Most of the youth who arrive in our program arrive when they're in their mid to late teens, so 16 to 17 years old. And a lot of them have already developed, a sense of identity, right? As before they arrive into our program. And now being in a new country, right, with new experiences, exposure to a new environment, sort of, experiences that will shape them into their young adulthood, right? And as you mentioned, sort of what are some of the challenges or that has come up in our program, especially serving youth from, African and Caribbean countries. And we have about around 42% of our youth who are currently in our program are from African and Caribbean countries. And then another 27% are from Central American countries and Mexico. And so sort of what is that dynamic, right? As you asked, I think from, what we've learned and what we do in our program, right? So going back to the question of transracial parenting, right? So sort of what is that experience for both youth and parents? I think from our program, what we often talk to parents about, resource parents, is that the journey as a resource parent often involves being open to having their perspective of the world, right? Question in a reflective way, right? So especially if, resource parents are caring for youth from different backgrounds, right? Different ethnic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, religious backgrounds, like how can they support their youth, right? How will this experience, this transracial parenting experience, broaden their lens in viewing the world, right? So I think part of what this discussion, part of what Sean and Antoine has shared that's so value and important is bringing awareness both to our resource parents and our youth, right? Because the experiences are very different, right? So for our youth who are coming, many of our youth are, have escaped persecution, have escaped violence and war from their home country, right? Poverty, and some may even, face persecution for being a member of an ethnic or religious minority, but they may not have experienced, some of the prejudices that they may face here in the U.S. because they're Black, right? And so that may be a new experience for them. And so for our resource parents who may not have shared, lived experiences or, to be able to support their youth, right, in bringing this awareness, having these discussions, so that, like you said, Reverend, right, so that our children, their children, will come home safe, right? That they, are aware of some of these encounters or what they may face just walking down the street, and how to prepare them and how to support them. And I think, Sean, you were saying just about the trauma, right? Like these are youth who have gone through, extreme traumatic experiences, right? Like I said, they're fleeing, like they have experienced fleeing violence, right? And I've had one resource parent share that she had the talk with her girls, and it brought up a tremendous amount of just trauma from their own history. Like they fled from their home country to find safety in the US, and here they are potentially facing prejudices and violence, right? So how do we balance and protect our kids,
Thank you so much. A follow-up question with that. Some will say, is it appropriate for a resource parent who is white to take in a child of color? Is that correct? Is that right? Do they have the resources? Do they have the background to do that? The flip side of that might be, would you deny a loving home, a loving parent who is white from engaging with a student of color? Has that been a something you've had to confront, or a question that you've had to respond to?
Yeah, I mean, in my personal experience, it's not a question that I've encountered in my work with the refugee foster care program, although I am aware of that, conversations around that. And what we, just as I mentioned earlier about, the journey as a resource parent, or the experience as a resource parent is really a journey, right? About being open to new experiences. And so one thing that we've encouraged resource parents to do, especially if they are raising a youth from a different background, different culture, different race, right? That to, you know, to have a breadth of friends who have different lived experiences, who may be a source of strength and support to them and their youth, right, their child. We've had a number of families, you know, Christian, non-Black resource and non-Black resource families who have connected with, you know, local Muslim community centers or the Eritrean and Ethiopian community centers for their youth and with their youth, right? They're going with their youth to events there, right? So they are, you know, I don't know if the term is allies, but they are there to support the youth, and they are there. And, you know, there are definitely limitations to, I wouldn't say limitations, but, you know, we each have our different experiences, right? And we may not be able to, we may have different experiences as our children that we're raising, but it doesn't mean that we can't reach out, right? We can't try and understand and look at the world through our youth's lens and see what resources are out there, community members who are, you know, who can support us in providing those connections, right? To the children, to our youth, right? And I think one of the, a word that I think Antoine, you had shared earlier, sort of the disempowerment, right? So wanting to find ways to empower our youth and to empower our parents to be able to feel comfortable having these conversations, as difficult as it is, in order to, I think what you guys are saying is to bring awareness, right?
Absolutely.
To bring awareness so that we can have these conversations and we can, you know, protect our young people.
Very good. You've said so many things, and I want to have some follow-up questions. But before I do, before I do that, I want to bring in Sabri Ramirez. And if you, Sabri, could just share a little bit about your background and what you do, and maybe comment on the resource parenting that happens with Catholic Charities.
Yeah, good afternoon. So my name is Sabri Ramirez, and I'm Assistant Improvement Director here at Catholic Charities. And I'm a little bit of a jack of all trades when it comes to the agency. I've actually started off by overseeing the programs that Antoine and Sean mentioned. I still have a hand in that a little bit. I've actually done training for Kansas program. So it's definitely a loaded topic, and I'm like, oh, I can talk about this all day. I'll start with some of my experience just to help out maybe a little bit. You know,
Please.
I started dealing with the police when I was 13 years old. And I say it like that on purpose because the last time I had to deal with the police was about 3 years ago. So it's still happening, you know. I'm 40 years old. As a 37-year-old man, I was riding my bike through my neighborhood. I got pulled over by the police, and they asked, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Riding my bike. I'm not going anywhere specific, just riding my bike." "Do you live around here?" "I do." "Let me see your ID." "I don't have it." "Why not?" "I'm just on a bike ride." Like, I didn't think I needed it. To make a long story short, the officer asked me to raise my shirt off so he can see if I had any tattoos. He asked if I had a criminal record. And like it's already been mentioned, you know, when I was younger, I used to put up a fight because I was like, I can't be treated this way. But you know what? I actually have ended up on the floor with bruises on my head and bruises on my arm and bruises on my side because I tried to exercise my right. They didn't go to jail for it, but I was definitely roughed up. So by the time I got to be 37, I was like, well, I'm tired of getting roughed up. So let me just lift my shirt. Let me just go through the motions because I need to get home to my children, you know? And it leaves you really, really feeling really weird. Like it's already been mentioned by Sean and Antoine, right? Where like, I know I have rights, or I've been told I have rights, right? But in practicality, it's almost like I don't. And I have to make a choice between trying to exercise those rights or making it home safely. And 99% of the time I've chosen, let me just make it home safely. It's also a little weird because I'm also a father now. My oldest son is 21, is going to be 21 years old. And it's interesting, the timing, because he didn't know I was going to be part of this panel. And last night at around 11, he came home and we were talking and he goes, "Dad, guess what happened?" I said, "What happened?" And he said, "Man, I think the cops punked me." And I said, "Well, tell me, what's going on?" Again, trying to make a long story short, what was happening is he was driving down Lawrence Expressway. So if you're familiar with San Jose, that's kind of like border San Jose, Cupertino. We live pretty close to Cupertino. He would head to McDonald's with his friend who happens to be Black. A police officer pulled up behind them. And according to my son, the police officer followed him for a good while. Police officer then pulled to the left, sped up, looked over to see who was driving, stepped to the brake, got back behind my son, lit him up. My son happened to get to a point where he had to make a right. So he's like, "Okay, I guess I'm gonna make a right and pull over." As soon as he tried to make a right and pull over, the police officer just kept going, did not pull my son over. And he said, "Dad, why do you think that happened?" I said, "Honestly, I think he was hoping to spook you and to maybe force you into a mistake so that he could pull you over." He pulled over to see who was in the car. He saw a brown kid, he saw a Black kid, and decided to mess with you. That's my honest belief, because there's no other reason why that should have happened. I've had to talk with him. You know, I didn't have it growing up necessarily. I was told by my parents to be careful with police, but I don't think it was very explicitly explained why. Racism wasn't explained, but I was told, "Hey, be careful, listen to them, do as asked." I was taught to fear the police. That's how I grew up. When my son was about a teenager, I did have those conversations with him where I told him, "Look, you might be treated differently because of your color of your skin. We live in a neighborhood where most of your student peers are either white or Asian. You are the outsider. Try not to be out late, even though it's okay for you to be out late. There's nothing illegal with you being out late. Try not to be out late. Cop pulls you over, like everyone's already mentioned. Don't do anything. Make your hands visible. Don't move until asked to be moved. And even if they ask you, can I see your registration? Ask for permission. Can I go into my glove compartment? Right? And all those things are, again, my son grew up in this neighborhood. So he's like, why though? Why? I'm like, it's better safe than sorry, son. I'm sorry. I know it feels like you got to swallow your pride, but I'd rather you come home than not, you know? So it's really tough. It's really tough.
I can imagine that there are some people on this call, on this Zoom session, who are saying, well, just obey the police, do what the police say, and nothing will go wrong. But I know the frustration level just starts to escalate and climb with the double standard. Why do I have to do this? Antoine and Sean talked about, maybe getting stopped, 15 times by police officers while driving. Me talking about getting stopped in 4 different states while driving. And as they shared, never getting a ticket, never, having, though accused of wrongdoing, never being culpable for any wrongdoing that they may have been stopping me for. You talked about your reasoning with your son as to why the cops might have stopped him. I'll give you one more reason. Because I know this happened to me years ago, driving down Highway 280. They stopped me. They said I was swerving in the lanes, which I had not. They said, "We think you may have been drinking." I had not been drinking. And so they started me, walking a straight line. And then they got an emergency call that they had to respond to. And they said, "Oh, you're okay." And they jumped in their car and they sped away. So they may have been responding to a more urgent situation.
Definitely possible. Yeah. Again, it's difficult. And I've been pulled over several times against that, because since I was 13, I've actually even been told directly, I've been pulled out of my car, searched. And when I asked, "Can I ask you why I'm being pulled over?" I literally got told, "Because you look suspicious."
Yeah.
That's what I got told.
Yeah.
Because you look suspicious. Not tail lights, not like, it was like the way I look, I'm just driving down the street. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Didn't get a ticket. I was told, okay, you're good, be safe. I was until you saw me. It's super difficult. And then yeah, so even when working with youth, like I actually do remember a training that I conducted with Candace for Candace's team, and that topic came up where a parent asked me, well, how do I know what's trauma and how do I know what's culture? Right? Like the specific thing that was brought up was, what if someone doesn't make eye contact? And I said, that could be a cultural thing,
Absolutely.
right? So I don't want someone to be like, well, you're traumatized because you won't look me in the eye, right? But what I said is, you also know, because I know how the program runs, your child's history. So if the kid has trauma in their history, right? So, and trauma usually hits us pretty similarly regardless of where we're from, right? PTSD doesn't discriminate. It could be any race and get PTSD. So that's one thing I actually kind of helped out in that one training, was helping the parents understand that not to use culture as a reason to not look at trauma, but at the same time, not using culture to assume that there's trauma, right? So it's a fine line that I think when you're not raising maybe a child that's from the same culture or the same background as you, it's a fine line you have to walk, and it's a fine line that you have to watch.
Yeah, I want to pursue that topic of possibly raising a child that's not of the same ethnicity or cultural background. Recently, I read some material by Rebecca Carroll. She's an author and podcast host. She recently wrote her memoirs on transracial adoption, and the title is Surviving the White Gaze. And she speaks to the fact that the foundational dynamic can be different when you have white parents who are serving as resource parents or foster parents for a Black or brown child. She says that white parents are setting the tone, that white parents are setting the structure, setting the standards, setting and telling you what is valuable, making choices for their kids. And in a sense, kids being raised in that foster situation don't have any rights. And she speaks to the fact that white parents must make conscious decisions about incorporating and including and immersing and valuing Blackness or brownness. That's what you spoke, I think, about, Candace. Otherwise, it can be very problematic. She speaks to the fact that it's more than just having a Black doll or a brown doll. It's more than having a poster. It's more than having a one mentor. It's an immersion process that must happen. And she raises the question, and I'm going to turn it back over to you. She raises the question, are white adoptive parents or white foster parents or white resource parents prepared to raise a Black child into being a Black adult? Or
Hey, Reverend,
white...
just quick reminder, you also have Elizabeth Alvarez as a panelist, just in case.
I did not know that. Okay, and Elizabeth, unmute yourself. I'm going to end with that question. Elizabeth, I did not know you were with us. Forgive me, please. Introduce yourself and your role, and if you can address that question, please do.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm actually so engaged in listening to you all. I'm okay with passing today because I know there'll be future conversations to be had. And at many points in this, listening to you all, close to tears, because absolutely I feel and hear and identify with so many of the stories. So if somebody else wants to proceed and respond to that question, it would be great.
Okay. So my question was, and I'll throw this to the entire panel if somebody wants to respond. a question can be raised for that foster parent, for that resource parent who happens to be white. Are they prepared to raise a brown child into a brown adult, or a Asian child into an Asian adult, or a Black child into being a Black adult? Anyone want to comment?
I'll just quickly answer that, at least in our program, we try very hard. And when we outreach and engage with prospective foster parents, that we have foster parents from all different backgrounds, right? We try and have resource parents. That's the new term in California. Resource parents that reflect the diversity of youth in our care, right? With that said, we do have a number of transracial families or transracial parenting experiences in our program. And to that degree about culture, I think like you said, or maybe alluded to that, for us, it's really, I talk a lot about this journey, right, that resource parents are on, because I mean, personally, I do see it as a journey. There's a lot that resource parents are learning, are experiencing.
Which is very, very, very new for many of them.
Right, exactly, right. And so part of that journey is to celebrate a youth's cultural heritage, right? We really, for our program, for the refugee foster care program in particular, really try and celebrate a youth's culture, a family, right? A resource family, and sort of support them as youth develop their self-identity as a young person in America. And at the same time, like you said, right, these conversations are crucial to have and to prepare youth, the stories that you've shared, right? The other panelist members have shared, maybe new to them, or may trigger, experiences that they have suffered, in their home countries. And so I think I think you posed, or the question that was posed, it's are we willing to do what we can to understand where our youth are coming from,
Yes.
to reach out to the community, to support them, to have an openness to hear. And I think a lot of it is empowering the youth to have a voice, to share their experiences, right? And there are times when, as a parent, any parent, there are experiences that are new that we may be out of, like, we just are not prepared for. What do we do, right? We talk to others. We try and find support and so that we can prepare and love the youth that are in our lives. I don't know if that answers your question.
You're right on. I think it's important for those resource parents, and that's a new term for me. Thank you for introducing me to it. For those resource parents to understand that we're in a society where the notion of racelessness is a misnomer. I mean, that doesn't exist. That notion of a colorblind society or a post-racial society does not exist. And I can't just see the world in my lens. I must look beyond and not have blinders on, but see beyond my cultural point of view, recognizing the Blackness or brownness in that child is a phenomenal thing, is a cultural rich thing, is a thing that has lineage, recognizes the legacy of Black and Brown and Asian and Native people to be rich and not to be avoided. I appreciate what you shared. As I look at the clock, it's we've got 5 minutes to go. Sean, Antoine, Sabri, and Candace, I want to give you a chance to give a closing statement or closing bit of advice to those who are listening, and even Elizabeth, feel free, but you limit it to a minute. If you want to take less, that's fine. And I'll start with Antoine, then Sean, then Candace, then Elizabeth, and close out with you, Sabri.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, in closing, I would like to thank everybody that's here, everybody that ends up watching this. I think this is part of the work, right? Of being aware, listening to the stories, being open to them, being open-minded, having an open perspective, and really embracing all of it as part of this journey. As Candace said, I think as a parent, but just as humans, right? We're continuously growing and learning. And I think if we can all agree with that and be in that kind of space, we can see our world and our society be in a better spot overall. So I just want to appreciate everyone. And with that, as a closing, just still continue to be open to learning, be open to hearing people's stories, treat everyone with respect, regardless of what they look like or where they're from. And, you know, choose love over everything else. And I think that is how we get to where I think a lot of us would like to see the world be, this country be, society be. So those are my closing statements.
Thank you so much. Sean?
Yeah, if I can just summarize and close as well, I think it's important, obviously, to have the talk. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of our culture and society, but also to allow space to process, right, those experiences. As Sabri said, his son felt comfortable coming to him and saying, "Hey, this is what just happened," and then creating that space for them to process that, so that he's not holding on to that anger the next time it happens. Because as we know, that can turn into a situation where maybe he gets roughed up, or it can just, it allows room for things that we don't want to happen. So I think having a space, having that safety with our children and our young people, so that they can be honest about what they're experiencing, process it, and just be healthier emotionally, so that when those situations come up, they can navigate it the best that they can. Obviously, they should be able to have their rights and act in response to those rights, but that's just not the reality. But I think, as Antoine said, choose love. I think the power of relationships is, those different supports, those different friends that we have, that diversity in our relationships will make certain issues matter more to us. I've had friends that, because they are friends with Antoine and I, Black Lives Matter matters to them. So when it comes up, it's like they go to those parents, and if their parents don't believe in that or aren't supportive, they can argue, almost on our behalf and on their behalf, because of the power of that relationship. No, I know somebody that's from this community, and so we have to be different, right? And so I think just using the influence of ourselves in our relationships to each other, and then being willing to defend and support each other as needed is definitely going to be key. And I'll stop there.
Candace?
Yeah, I like the tagline, choose love. I think just for my echoing everything that's already been said so far, and just recognizing that there is a lot of pain and hurt that's going around, to hold space for that, both for ourselves and for the people that we work with, to process and to grieve, and then to stand up when we see injustice, right? To
Amen.
be there, right? To be there. And I think that's part of the bringing awareness and having a safe space to have these discussions, so that there's that just, this is the work, right, that we're doing. So
Amen.
thank you for those who have shared, for all of your your stories. It's empowering to hear them.
Okay, Father Pedigo, I see it's 1 o'clock. Do we have time to hear closing statements from Sabri and Elizabeth, or should we get
Yes,
there now?
yes, let's go ahead and get Elizabeth and Sabri. Great.
Elizabeth, go right ahead. And again, I apologize for not including you before.
Oh, not to worry.
You're with Franklin McKinley School District, correct?
I am with the Franklin McKinley Children's Initiative, but Children's Initiative in general. Everyone just spoke so eloquently, beautifully, and I think, affirming what everyone already said, I'd say, and also just to add the fact that we are a product of our experience and acknowledging that and learning from our history. I think it's just if we don't learn from the past, we have to be okay with it. There's struggle and there's pain, and we need to accept that it's real and can't deny it. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Sabri.
Yeah, I guess thanks to everyone for sharing, and thank you for even allowing me to share a little bit about my experience. And I guess what I'll say is one of the reasons I was really grateful for this opportunity was because I sometimes feel that living in the Bay Area, we kind of grew up in a bubble, right? And I know when I was growing up, I would think, oh, racism, that happens in the South, that happens in the Midwest, right? Because maybe it's not as overt. But obviously I've experienced the different, I've had a different experience, and so has Antoine and Sean, and so have you, Reverend, right? So I guess what I like to remind people is like, yeah, these are things that just still go on today. They happen in your communities, in your backyard. They're real and relevant. So pay attention to them.
Amen. Thank you all so much. Father John Pedigo.
Thank you, Reverend Steve, and thank you to all the panelists that joined us. And thank you for the viewers that are watching this. Please post this on your social media to get the word out. It's an important conversation to have. Our next conversation will be on April 20th at 12 noon for another brown bag lunch on race, Black Lives Matter. And that will be with Reverend Jeff Moore, who is the Executive Director for NAACP Silicon Valley, San Jose. And he'll be talking about Black identity for people from mixed races. And so bringing in the youth voice to this conversation. So it's really great. We will be having additional brown bag lunches on other topics as well. So we'll let you know about that. Those are all being developed out of advocacy community engagement. We need to have that conversation with ourselves, and so that we can have that conversation with our clients and with the people that we serve. Thank you all very much for joining us. Hope to see you all next month. Please watch the advertisements for further conversations. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.